Check this out.
Welcome back to the Deep Dive. Today, we're doing something a little different.
Yeah, a little bit.
Usually, we're breaking down a business strategy, maybe some new legislation or a biography. But today, we are tackling a manifesto.
I was going to say, even calling it a manifesto might be selling it short. It reads more like a cosmological argument.
A cosmological argument, okay.
This very specific, very intense attempt to basically rewrite the accepted history of the human species.
Right off the bat, the author sets a tone that is, well, it's unique. He writes under the name The Reverend Point Blank.
And the witicizer of comedy.
The witicizer of comedy, right. He gives us this bio where he's straight from the Chi, so Chicago, and he credits the city with teaching him the street hustle. Mm-hmm. But then, in the same breath, he pivots to what he calls the gospel of self-knowledge.
And that's the hook, isn't it? It's fascinating.
Thank you, Mike and Mika. You say the first man on Earth was white, but genetics tell me, well, you picking the wrong damn fight. Before the clock began to tick, before the first stone was hewn, before the tides were pulled along by the young silver moon, the great designers reached into the rich and ancient dome and called the spirit of the first to make this earth home. He didn't reach for winter frost or the pale and drifting sand. He reached for the carbon seed to occupy the land. In the valley of the Omo, where the rivers run so deep, the fathers of diaspora woke from a holy sleep. He stood beneath the zenith sun, a pillar of the night, with skin that drank the solar flame and turned it into might. A walking, breathing prism holding secrets in his skin. The treasure chest of everything that lies without and within. For they tell you that the branch is where the power started growing. But we know the ancient root is where the life blood is flowing. Two pale stars is a lonely sky that cannot birth the midnight sun. The math of the creators says the source is always one. He carried every copper hue, he carried every gold. The story of the human race within his moral is told. It isn't power, it isn't pride, it's the law of what was true. First man was the ink from which great composers drew. Black is not a single stripe upon the rainbow's arc. It is the divine total, the light within the dark. The blueprint of the world was dark, the original design, a masterpiece of milling, majestic and divine, across the currents of the ancient Nile, to forge of the Tuskegee Field a legacy which is built mile by mile, a secret that the stars of soil would yield to see. The past are the roots of the heavenly tree. Before the streams, before the gears, the Kandahars ruled with iron spears, and Caleb of Axe sat on gold. In empires where the trade of worlds were told, then came the builders of pyramids of height, measuring the sun to capture the light. A foundation of stone, of wisdom and bone, where the seed of the future was silently sown. Its presence, the architect of change. From the dark of the night, Lewis Latimer drew a carbon thread that let the light shine through. Garrett Morgan commanded the streets with signals and masks to make safety complete. Madam C.J. Walker built a kingdom from care, while Valerie Thomas sent the light through the air, creating 3D images, the illusion, the dream, changing the world with a digital gleam. Mark Dean and Jesse Russell joined the race, connecting our voices through a cellular space. From the PC to the desk on the phone in your hand, their genius is woven throughout every land. But the story is not over. The ink is still wet. The greatest inventions are coming here yet. In the minds of the children who study the past is a vision of peace that's destined to last. They will build on the courage of Nzinga the Brave and the wisdom that Frederick Douglass once gave. They will engineer worlds where the oceans are clean, powered by logic and spirits serene. From the master mariner sailed on the sea to the PC prodigy of modern decree. The contributions are vast, a river of fire lifting all humanity higher and higher. Red from the blood of the struggle they heap, gold for the brilliance that always breaks through. Point blank, enjoy your time and master the nine. Peace and love.
You have this voice that feels so grounded, almost gritty, you know, that Chicago grind.
Yeah.
But the content is just, it's reaching for the stars. He's blending theology, genetics, history, and poetry all at once. The mission here isn't just a history lesson. It's about reclaiming a lineage.
So let's define the mission for this deep dive then. If we strip away the persona, what is the core argument he's really making?
The central thesis, I think, is this concept of the original source.
The original source.
Yeah. The author is arguing that Black ancestry is not just one branch on the human family tree, but the trunk, the actual trunk. He's saying it's the genetic and spiritual default setting for humanity.
Wow.
And these texts are his attempt to prove that. He's tracing a line for the very first human all the way to, like, the smartphone you probably have in your pocket right now.
That is a massive scope. And he starts the master blueprint with this direct challenge to the Western narrative. He writes, you say the first man on Earth, history says he was white, but genetics tells me you picking the wrong fight.
He immediately sets up that dichotomy, right? History versus genetics.
Right.
In his view, written history can be fabricated, it can be distorted, but biology is the truth.
Yeah.
He's appealing to the physical code of life to make his point.
He uses this really vivid metaphor to describe that origin point. He talks about the Valley of the Omo.
Which is a real place, by the way. The Omo Valley in Ethiopia is one of the most significant paleoanthropological sites in the world. But he frames it mythically.
How so?
He says the great designer didn't reach for winter frost or pale and drifting sand when creating the first human.
No, he says the creator reached for the carbon seed.
That phrase right there, carbon seed, that's the anchor for his whole argument. I mean, we all know carbon is the fundamental building block of life.
Of course.
So by connecting the first man with the carbon seed in this rich and ancient loam, he's arguing that blackness is the organic, fertile baseline of existence. And he contrasts that with winter frost, which implies something, you know, frozen, dormant, lacking life.
There's a line where he describes this first man as a walking, breathing prism.
Yeah.
That stopped me for a second.
It should.
Because usually a prism is what splits white light into colors.
Exactly. You shine white light through a prism, you get the full rainbow. He's flipping that whole concept. He's saying the first man already contained the potential for every race, every variation, right there in his genetic code. The text says he was holding secrets in his skin.
So in this model, everyone else is a derivative of that first prism.
That is the implication. He writes, 2 pale stars in a lonely sky can't birth the midnight sun. It's a poetic way of talking about recessive and dominant genes.
I see.
He's arguing you can get lighter variations from a dark source genetically, you can subtract melanin, but you can't get the divine total, as he calls it, the full spectrum, from a source that lacks it to begin with.
He calls black the divine total.
Yes. He views melanin as more than just pigment, it's a cosmic connection. He says the first man drank the solar flame. It's a very vitalist view of biology, like this carbon seed has a unique capacity to absorb and use energy from the sun.
Okay, so if the origin story is one of being the divine total and the original source, the obvious question is, well, how do we get to the last 400 years? How do you go from drinking the solar flame to the history of slavery and systemic oppression?
And this is where the text shifts from that mythology to more of a political philosophy, and this is important. The author completely refuses the narrative of victimhood.
He's very explicit about that. He writes, to tell the history of the struggle, it is not a story of being a victim.
No. Instead, he frames it as a structural engineering problem. He calls the system of oppression the perfect cage.
The perfect cage. That sounds terrifyingly industrial.
It's intended to. He describes the oppressors as architects who tried to engineer the climate. He's suggesting the hardship wasn't an accident or bad luck or even just brute force.
It was designed.
It was a designed environment. It was intended to freeze that carbon seed we were just talking about.
So the survival of that seed isn't just luck, it's an act of resistance.
Precisely. He defines Black history as the story of men who refuse to freeze. If the system is winter, cold, engineered, artificial, then the resistance is heat, organic life, endurance. He calls it the greatest resistance in human history because it was a battle against a perfect design.
Okay, so let's look at the evidence he brings for this. We move into the second text, Voices of the Diaspora. He starts listing these historical figures to back up this claim of resilience. But he groups them in a really interesting way. He starts with the Kandaks.
The Kandaks were the Candaces. These were the queens of the kingdom of Cush in ancient Nubia.
And he says they ruled with iron spears, before steam, before gears.
See, he's messing with your timeline there. We often associate technology and power with the Industrial Revolution, steam and gears.
Right.
By highlighting iron spears in the Kandaks, he's reminding us that African metallurgy and military tech predated the industrial rise of Western Europe. He's claiming chronological superiority.
Then he drops a name I honestly hadn't heard before, Caleb of Axum.
Caleb is a heavyweight, a major historical figure. He was the king of Axum in the 6th century. This was an empire in what's now Ethiopia and Eritrea, parts of the Arabian Peninsula. They printed their own money. They controlled trade between Rome and India.
The text says he sat on gold in empires where the trade of worlds was told.
The trade of worlds is the key phrase there. It frames Black history as a history of globalism. Axum wasn't isolated. It was a central node in the entire world economy.
It pushes back on that idea of a disconnected Africa.
Completely. And of course he mentions the builders of the pyramids, but he doesn't talk about the size of the stones or the labor. He says they were measuring the sun to capture the light.
So he's focusing on the intellectual property.
Not the labor, but the science. The astronomy, the mathematics, the alignment, it all connects back to that solar flame idea. That this is a culture obsessed with light and energy.
Which sets up the biggest leap in the text. We go from pyramids to the light bulb.
And this is the Architects of Change section. This is where the author's whole literary structure really clicks into place. He's arguing that the genius didn't stop when the empires fell. It just changed form.
He mentions Lewis Latimer.
Right. Lewis Latimer is such a crucial figure here. He worked with Thomas Edison, with Alexander Graham Bell, but his big contribution was inventing the carbon filament that made incandescent light bulbs actually practical.
Before Latimer, they burned out really fast.
In days, yeah.
And the text says he drew a carbon thread.
And there it is. That's the callback.
It's the carbon seed again.
Exactly. The author is drawing a direct line from the carbon seed of the first man in the Omo Valley to the carbon thread inside the light bulb. He's arguing that modern illumination is literally powered by the same element that defines Black heritage. It's a brilliant way to say you cannot see in the dark without us.
He does this with safety too. He brings up Garrett Morgan.
The inventor of the 3-position traffic signal and the safety hood, which basically became the gas mask. The text says he commanded the street. It portrays him as someone bringing order to chaos.
And Madam C.J. Walker, he says she built a kingdom from care.
I love that phrasing. The ancient kings like Caleb built kingdoms from conquest and trade, right?
Right.
She built one from care, from self-care, beauty, hygiene. She became the first female self-made millionaire in America by focusing on uplifting her own community. It's a different kind of empire, but it's an empire nonetheless.
But then the timeline shifts again. We get into the digital age. And this is where the argument gets really aggressive. He lists Valerie Thomas.
And this is the rebuttal to the idea that Black history stops at, say, the Civil Rights Movement. Valerie Thomas was a NASA scientist. She invented the illusion transmitter in 1980.
And the text calls it creating the 3D images, the illusion, the dream.
Right. And that technology is the basis for 3D movies, for how we transmit complex images. The author calls it a new digital gleam, contrasting it with the ancient solar flame. It's still about light, but now it's digital light.
And finally, he pairs Mark Dean and Jesse Russell.
Two giants, absolute giants of the computer and telecom age. Mark Dean holds 3 of the original 9 patents for the standard PC, the architecture that lets your computer use plug-in devices.
And Jesse Russell,
a father of digital cellular technology.
The text says, from the PC on the desk to the phone in your hand.
And that's the author's big aha moment. He's saying, Look at the device you're holding right now. Look at the screen you're staring at. That technology isn't foreign to this lineage. It is a direct product of it.
He writes that this genius is woven throughout every land.
The argument is, you can try to ignore the history, but you are literally holding the evidence of it in your hand. The original source has migrated from the Valley of the Omo into the fiber optic cables of the world. It frames your daily reality as a testament to this legacy.
That is a really powerful reframing. It makes the technology feel like a continuation of the biology. So where does he think this is all going? There's a section called the unwritten horizon.
He describes the future as wet ink.
Meaning it's not written yet, it's malleable.
Exactly, but he has a specific vision for it. He mentions the children building on the courage of Nzinga, another warrior queen, and the wisdom of Frederick Douglass. But interestingly, the goal isn't conquest or domination.
No, he talks about oceans are clean, powered by logic, and spiritually serene.
It's an ecological technocracy, powered by logic. That's science, the carbon film of the cellular data. Spiritually serene, that's the divine total of the soul. He thinks the ultimate destiny of this original source isn't just to survive the cage, but to save the planet, to bring balance back to the winter.
And he wraps this entire massive timeline up in a very simple moral framework, the law of karma.
Whatever you do comes right back to you.
It feels almost too simple after all that complex history and genetic theory.
But look at the context. He calls it the Master Mariner sail. He views history as a river of fire. If you're a Master Mariner, you know how to navigate the storm. He's saying that black people, by surviving the perfect cage, have become the master mariners of the human experience.
So the struggle wasn't pointless. It was training.
In his worldview, yes. It was the forging of a spirit that is now capable of leading humanity to that serene future. The text says the goal is to lift humanity mentality higher and higher. It's a messianic vision, really. The suffering produced the wisdom needed to save the whole ship.
It is a lot to process. It essentially demands that you look at everything from the concept of genetics to the smartphone in your pocket completely differently.
It demands you recognize the source. And it challenges you, the listener, to ask, if this is the foundation, why is it so often treated as the margin?
Before we sign off, I have to ask about the very last line. It's an instruction. He says, point blank, master the 9 and enjoy your time.
Master the 9.
He doesn't explicitly say what the 9 are in the text we have. It's cryptic.
It is. It's the final puzzle piece. I mean, it could be a reference to the Ennead of ancient Egyptian mythology, the 9 deities of creation.
Or what about the 9 patents of Mark Dean you mentioned earlier?
That's a good thought. It could be that. Or maybe it's something more abstract.
Like what?
Maybe the 9 are a set of principles or virtues he believes are necessary to navigate that river of fire. You know, if the future is wet ink, maybe the 9 are the pens you need to write it.
And that's the provocative thought we want to leave you with today. If history is a blueprint and the future is waiting to be written, what are the tools you're missing? What are the 9?
And are you just drifting in the current, or are you steering the ship like a master mariner?
Something to think about next time you turn on a light or check your phone. Thanks for taking this deep dive into the master blueprint with us.
Get you on the next
We're giving it to you point straight up true.